I'm Mo Mortlock. I worked on the 1588 to 90 panel in HMS Drake in Plymouth for 2 years. My husband was Chief of Staff in Plymouth in the Navy, and unfortunately he was moved in 1990 and we had to move away, so I wasn't able to continue.
Hi, I'm Tom Roncarelli. My mother was Joan Roncarelli, who was the head tapisser from 1986, would it have been?
76, yes.
Yes, up until her death, which was in 1999. So I supported her. I did much of the moving around to certain panels and used to visit different centres as she used to visit on the odd occasion when I was at home, and saw many of her interactions and much of the comings and goings that used to go on.
Barbara Peacock. I'm from the Line Regis Group, which started in 1987 and finished in 2000. We did 6 panels, and the first one we started was the Bermuda panel, which was about Sir George Somers, who was Mayor of Lyme Regis.
I'm Renee Harvey, and I was a member of the Exeter team, and I had done some kneelers for our local church, and a neighbour was walking up the road with me afterwards, and we got talking. She said, would you like to join? You do Tapestry. Would you like to join a team? I'd recently been to Coventry Cathedral and I'd seen the Sunderland Tapestry, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to be a member, to be able to help do something like that? And this is how I started. There was a meeting at Dorothy's house shortly after with Joan, and our team was formed, and we did the 1587 panel. And I think we were probably the team that were moved around the most, because we kept on losing the premises that we were stitching in for various reasons.
Well, I'm Janice Kenderdine, and I worked on the Ivy Bridge panel from 1586. Well, it was a 1586 panel. I did that for 4 years, and I also took a panel over to America and gave a lecture to the 17th century colonial dames. I did many exhibitions with Tom Maddock, who was the original historian for the armorials, or the armorial shields. And I was his chauffeur, basically, so I got to be taking him around to all of the different panels. I got to do stitches in every panel. So I was very lucky in that respect. I got to meet a lot of people, Princess Anne, for example. My particular piece on the panel was of a parsley herb and a shield with Sir John Harris and the Chowan and Maratuck rivers, quite difficult to say, and a little dog, a daysman, etc. And I did overall about 1 square metre, which took me all that time, voluntary work, and hours and hours and hours, and I did every stitch upside down.
Why upside down?
Because I was on that side of the table. We only unrolled a certain amount of tapestry at a time to work on. So the bottom half may have been done, and I was on the top half, which happened to be rolled out. And there I was, beavering away upside down. So when Tom came along and said, no, 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 we were not too pleased, because not only we had to unpick it all again, which took ages, because it was very fiddly, because there were 16 stitches to the inch, which was a lot of work. We had to unpick it all, and then we had to start afresh, and that took another couple of hours each time.
Why did you have to unpick it?
Because it was wrong in some way. He didn't like it. He perhaps decided the dog should be a different colour, or he should have a longer tail, or all sorts of minor things, you know.
We had to alter the colour of the wood on one of the bookcases in Harvard University on that panel.
That was a big piece, I bet.
Yes. So, but I think, you know, I don't know about you, but we had to learn how to unpick safely
I
before,
don't remember
you know,
unpicking
right
at
in the
all.
early stages to make sure that if you did have to unpick at all, that you didn't injure the canvas, you know. 'Cause
Was
that
the canvas called calico?
No.
What was the calico?
The calico was what we used for the. It came from Whaley's. It's a cotton fabric, and that's what we did the covers with. Yes, one of our team made these big covers to put over, and then you tied them at night.
Yeah.
Yes, but no. In the early stages with our first panel, because Tom was living at Plymouth then, and we had to do the faces first. All the faces on that 1587 panel. So you were outlined in black.
Yeah.
And I can remember that the first bit of colour on that panel was the man in the stock. There's a stock on the 1587 panel, and this poor chap's up there, and it was my piece to do this stock. And I was dead chuffed because it was the first bit of colour we could use. But he came and inspected the expressions on the faces. You know, because they had the expressions on the faces had to be right, and you know, it was with some of the faces, they were so small that a stitch on one side would make the expression different to a stitch on the other side. So sometimes, you know, you had to experiment a bit to see which one fitted in better. But he did. He vetted the expressions on the faces before we went on.
Bearing in mind that tapestry canvas is very angular. All the stitches are facing one way. Very difficult to get
the stitches have all got
smiles
to lie
and
the same
expressions
way.
and so on.
Did you cheat?
No, never. We cheated. Did you? How did you cheat? Tell me.
Well, we just did a little bit of embroidery here and there, you know, just to make it go the right way.
Really? Oh.
Which panels did you do, Barbara?
I feel an unpicking going on and a re-stitching.
But no, what we had to do was unpick acres of background on somebody else's. What was that
They
all
did half
about,
cross
Renee?
stitch. Well, because some of them had done half cross stitch, we had to go to Chillington and unpick some stuff, and the ladies were very
visited
cross with us. But 3 of us from Exeter had to go with Joan because
Mother
they
used
put
to be very
they put the
diplomatic.
wrong stitch.
Because she used to go around and check on different
The
things.
back, you see, had to be literally you go over one thread and under 2. That's how you, and when you come back, you go the other way, top to bottom. So it made a padding on the back, which was quite strong and hard wearing. If you did like a cross stitch, if you went up and then came down straight on the same thread underneath, you would just get little gaps in the canvas. You could see the canvas
Which
through.
would distort the canvas,
Yes,
wouldn't
and
it?
so it was very important to you know, do the right stitch.
So very tight quality control and by everybody.
And you had to crawl underneath the tapestry sometimes to finish off the threads, because it was quite a wide thing. It was too wide to work in the centre. So half of it would be rolled under.
So
Yeah, a little
6 people could work on it at once. You had 3 one side and 3 the other side. You had to get in underneath and finish off, and then bring your needle up through and fasten off on the top. You just gave it a little pull, and then it disappears in.
It's a lot more complicated than one would imagine.
How did you all get into tapestry? Was this something that was something you were involved in before?
Yes.
I'd
I
never
was.
done tapestry at all. I'd done things like cross stitch and patchwork and dressmaking, but I had never done a tapestry stitch in my life.
Well, I was quite well known in the town for a tapestry because I used to enter the local garden association shows.
lovely.
I did. Well, my husband's a very keen gardener, so he grew all the fruit and vegetables and so on. I did all the domestic science and the embroidery and tapestry and that. And Tom Muddock, he sort of invited me to join the Ivy Bridge panel, which was held at the Methodist Church in one of the outside rooms.
From your own, other people's experience, how did you become aware of what Tom was working on? Because the way he explained it was the first group was working in the Preston house.
That's right.
Yes.
Doing the
Yes.
tapestry around the
That's
school
right.
teacher.
Yes.
And that was very much in partnership with the local vicar at the time
Yes.
to say, well, we've got some groups meeting, let's make use of Preston House that's next to the church. And that became sort of a community project.
Yes.
And then people came and saw them in action.
Yes.
And from that
That's
said,
right.
oh, I'm interested in that. Could we do something? And then suddenly that became a 20-year project because
Yes,
we had
they
to
just
keep
did
on
one
I
coming
think
up.
he started
Yes.
with one panel, and then it
Yeah.
was 4, and then it was 10.
It was going to be 14, wasn't it? And then it ended up...
I actually helped finish the Pristine House tapestries. The numbers had dwindled so much, and they had 3 little old ladies finishing it off, the last panel, and it seemed to take for ages. And it was the last gasp. So when our Ivy Bridge panel finished, I was invited to go in there and get stuck in, which I did for a further 6 months, which was lovely. I just did the background, but it needed doing. So
Gosh, I remember doing background in the 1588 one. The Queen was coming to put a stitch in.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
there were no stitches anywhere near where she was going to put her stitch. She was going to put her stitch in the date. And nobody had worked on that bit at all. It was a complete blank piece of canvas. So I used to go in every day doing background.
Oh, goodness.
Just more and more and more background. And other people went in and we just did a bit, not exactly where she put her stitch, but so that it looked as if she wasn't working on a blank canvas.
Because all the royals and the invited guests, their stitch were a gold stitch, so they could always be spotted as to where their particular stitch
As
was.
Prince Philip said, I know what you're going to do when I've gone. He said, you're going to take my stitch out and do it.
Yes, well, Prince, yeah.
No, we didn't. We left it.
No, we didn't. We didn't do that sort. Not if it was a VIP.
Princess Anne said hers wasn't, her stitch didn't bear looking at when we were talking about underneath, being neat and tidy. She said, mine on the right side doesn't bear looking at. But she put hers in the Woolman's 1630 panel because she was Master Woolman of that year.
My mother went to Clarence House with the Queen Mother for her to put her stitch in. And the Queen Mother said to my mother, "Oh, you better be careful I don't stick the needle in you," or something like that. And my mother said, "Oh, bless you." As if she
I
would.
can hear her saying that.
Yes.
Really.
So, Tom, your involvement was very much working with your mother then?
Well, I was running hotels in Leicestershire, and I left Leicestershire and came back to Devon, and my mother was fully involved in it when I came back. So how she initially got recruited, I'm not sure, other than the fact that she was always doing tapestries and sort of things with her hands, etc. So she was quite skilled. And then I used to hear long conversations between her and Tom on the telephone discussing various panels and things like that. And she was ordering all the wools and the colours, and it was quite an involving job. I think, was it Fox's who used to supply the wools?
It was Appleton's. But we had a donation originally. The 4-ply wool was not Peyton and Baldwin's. Emu.
Emu, that's right.
Then they were taken over, I believe, by Peyton and Baldwin's, and we had to then buy wool. But we had enough background wool until right on the last. I think it was about the last panel or 2 panels, and that natural colour was difficult to match. Really difficult.
Yeah, she had great problems.
But going back to
matching.
Tom, this will give you an idea of what we enabled Tom to help out with. We had to take our tapestry out of the window. We were that was our second home, and we had to take it across the high street to the Liberty shop in the Guildhall. And so Joan is in the top there wrapping up the tapestry. Then you can see it going out the window. And then on this picture here, you can see Sylvia's husband, who used to help out as well, and myself, and we stopped the traffic on the high street in Exeter to walk it across the road to our new home. And then, of course, we were there for a while, and then they said, "Oh, we want to sell Liberty furnishing fabrics." And luckily, one of the ladies in our group, her husband worked for the NFU, and they had this building down in Queen Street, and they let us have a room on the ground floor because the public could get in and out. And that was until they built their own fancy premises up on the bypass, and we had to find somewhere else. But that was the sort of thing. But that's going back to Tom. He got roped in, when we needed to borrow his body to
It was a bit similar in those days, only a bit. But yes, we used to get vans or strap it to the top of the roof and various.
That's right, yes.
Bill Long.
Yeah, Bill Long was Ivy
He
Brick.
was an electrician.
He was wonderful.
For example, at the Stitch in Time exhibition
That's
at West
right,
Point,
yes.
where thousands of people would come for the weekend to look at all the different exhibits, not just ours. But they used to pay £1 to put a stitch in as well. And that was a good thing because it actually encouraged people to come in off the street in all the different centres, didn't it? And that would also find tapesters who were, this is wonderful, I'd like to come along and do that. So I think sort of quite a few volunteers who were around.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Bill Long made these metal stands
Yes.
that the tapestries would have.
He did.
Yes.
So that we could display them at things like West Point for the weekend. And he set up lighting, and he and I would sort of get the whole thing sorted out before the show began and break it down afterwards, didn't we, on occasions?
Yeah.
So did any of you ever get a chance to go to the Bristol Museum or
Yes,
Cold
I did.
Harbour
Yeah.
and see it all on display?
Yes, well,
Some start-
We were at the
Never,
yes, weren't we?
You've never
yes.
seen it all in one place?
No, I saw it at Cold Harbour Mill.
Oh,
that
you
was
did?
it. Yes,
Yeah.
we
And
did
that was
have
it.
all of them
Were
there.
they all
did that.
there?
Yes, they
Oh,
were.
last
Were they
time.
for a while?
Yes.
Yes, I did
That was
see
for
them
the
there.
last time, yes. And
Took some of my American friends up there, and they were very keen to put stitches in. When I took the panel over to America, it was $5 a time to put a stitch in. And we got about 50 participants, all keen to put their stitches
and
in.
they've all got their certificates.
Oh yes,
Yes,
of course
we
they
used to have one of
Yes,
these little
yeah.
cards.
That's right.
Then
Everybody was given
they'd
a
put
card.
a little cross or a circle around where you'd put your stitch. And I put lots of stitches in, but I can't actually find the mark. Oh, yes, there's one. No, it's not. That's a doorway.
Yes.
And that's me in America giving lectures, a lecture. And that's the certificate that the Colonial Dames received later in the year for, what does it say, best in the county or state.
In recognition of outstanding achievement. There we go.
Ta-da. But I got through it anyway, and I was thrilled to do it, and they were thrilled to put the stitches in.
Yes. Isn't it?
Pierce
Is it
anybody.
Newfoundland? There's a duplicate
Yes,
that's been
that's right.
done over there.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Tom actually let them have a panel with the drawing on, and they've stitched it over there. I don't
There's only
know if
one
it's-
panel, wasn't
Yes.
it?
Was it full size? The full size canvas?
It's an
Yeah.
exact copy, and I don't know where it's being shown, but it must be there somewhere, mustn't it?
Well, I saw it when it was in Bristol, because I come from Bristol. And there were several panels. I don't think the whole thing was up. But
Oh, in the Commonwealth Museum.
Commonwealth
We have
Museum.
10 because they did an exhibition called the Pow Wow
Yes.
exhibition, and they showed all our Pocahontas panels. And I took a group of our Exeter ladies. We went up on the train, and because it was at Templemead Station. And it was so sad, really, because they were going to clear the engine sheds further up, the top end of Templemeads. And that was where the exhibition was going to be. But of course, they ran out of money, and usual thing, you know. I think the museum was, like a lot of them, small museums, were run on volunteers. And I was really concerned because by that time I'd taken over from Joan. I said to Tom, well, what's happening to the tapestry? Because at the time we were told that all the artefacts were going to Bristol Museum, an art gallery, but nothing was mentioned about the tapestry. And I said, well, you know, what's happening? Because we need to know whether it's safe or not. And I did actually ask if I could go up and see it. And they assured me, the museum assured me that it was safe because by that time we knew that that was eventually going to the museum as well. I suppose they couldn't find anywhere else for it. But at the time when I was told that the museum was closing, they hadn't got anywhere for the tapestry to go.
I didn't know where it went for a long time.
And so Tom then said, yes, it was going to the museum. And I said, well, is it being looked after properly? Because we'd been so meticulous about vacuuming it. And at the mill, we were careful with it because Tilly Trotty used to vacuum it through a piece of gauze to make sure that there were no mealybugs and woolly bears. I was really hoping that they would put one panel on a show,
Yes.
especially last year. Yes, it was 1616 was the Shakespeare thing.
Yeah.
And, why didn't we put the 1616 panel up? It would have been, people going to the museum saying, isn't this wonderful? They could have said, oh, yes, there's a lot more of this. Yeah. And it would need a huge place. I mean, really, ideally, what we would have liked or what is needed is something like the Portsmouth Tapestry has got, like a purpose-built building. Because it's not just the tapestry panels itself. It's all the history that goes with it, all of Tom Maddox and Paul Presswell's
historical
I was
research.
amazed to
The
see all the
research,
background
Yes.
information on
Exactly.
on
The
computer.
heraldry alone is
Yeah.
a completely different field. The heraldry, there's lots of people are now interested in genealogy and everything, their family history. And I can remember one of the panels we were doing in Tinley's, it must have been the 1587, has got I think it's the Spicer family, has 3 hands, 3 of them, red and white. And it was a bit difficult to do the fingers. And Tom asked me if I would redo the hands on this shield. And a group of children came in from school, from Maynard School, and they were asked if they would just look carefully on the panel and see something that they recognised. And it took them ages. It was quite funny. They were looking all over the various figures and everything. And then suddenly one of them clicked and said, "There's our school badge." And there they were, all of them in their blazers with the 3 hands on them.
Oh.
Yes, because Spicer, you see, the school is in Spicer Road. So the Maynard School has the Spicer shield as its badge, school badge. Yeah, so it was,
There were a lot of little quirky things like
yes,
that, weren't
so
there?
many, and lots of humour.
Yes.
The Andrex puppy and things like that.
Yes.
Isn't it funny?
Well, I did the
So
John
much.
Smith, who was shot, and he's sort of standing there with a big bloody hole here and blood dripping down and a big pool of blood on the ground. And when we had children from schools coming round, look at that. They all wanted to see the man who'd been shot.
Oh, the
But
cartoon
yes, it is
style
one of
just lent
Exeter's,
itself
Yeah.
to some of the illustrations that was on it, and it really transmitted to children, which is part of what Tom wanted to use the whole panels for, was to communicate history today
Definitely.
in a way that children would be able to want to understand it.
We had some Japanese students who wrote in and emailed my daughter and said, "This is the most interesting way of learning English history," and I thought that was really
great.
nice.
Yes.
Some Japanese
Hadn't thought of
university
them.
students. Yeah. I understand that there's 6 panels going to go on display in Preston House.
Really?
And I said to Tom, "Is that through the council?" And he said no, because the council in Plymouth weren't very receptive. I think they thought, this is a pie in the sky project, and I don't think they had any conception of what was going to happen. And I think probably on principle they won't have it in Plymouth now.
He did try. He did try very
Yes.
hard, didn't he, to get it in
Yes, he
Plymouth?
did, because he lived there, and it's such a shame. But the St Andrew's Church have requested for 6, and as far as I know, they are. How they're going to transport them, I don't know, because that is a big issue, isn't it?
We were the first ones to take a panel over to America, and we went to Texas, San Antonio, and I already knew a couple of the colonial dames, and they fixed up this lecture and so on. And we had to take this panel with an authorization letter from Tom through customs. And it was all rolled up like a bedroll. And customs people were not at all happy to let us through. But this was 30 years ago. We could have been smuggling anything in this roll of carpet or tapestry. They didn't know what it was, just read the letter. And we were met with much suspicion. And we flew over. It had to go in the hand luggage. It had to go in the racks up above, the cabinets.
How on earth did you manage to do that?
With great difficulty, but we did it. And Brian was in charge, my husband. So we did that, and we didn't dare let it out of our sight. It was really nerve-wracking, something as priceless as that. And Then we changed planes, of course, didn't we? We got down to Houston and we had to change to go over to San Antonio. And we had to go all through customs again, and we had another lot of suspicious looks, and they made very sure that we weren't going over there to sell this priceless heirloom. They were very worried that we were going to sell it, but we were only going for a few weeks, so we must have looked fairly innocent and assured them that we weren't. And when we were met at San Antonio, our two hostesses were there to greet us. And they said to Brian, we hadn't told them we were taking this tapestry panel. They said to Brian, what have you got there under your arm? He said, oh, that's my bedroll. And they believed him. And we were so tired after our transatlantic flight that we didn't bother unwrapping it that night. We left it until the next morning. And then we unfurled it all the way along this lovely lady's lounge. And she could not believe her eyes. It was fabulous to see her face. And she immediately got on the phone and alerted all the other colonial dames. And they then had to fix up something or other to stage this tapestry, which is not an easy thing to do because it was 11 feet long, 4 feet deep and so on. And they got it all fixed up and pegged up and so on. And I joined in their meeting, and they made me very welcome. And I did my best to do a spiel, not a speaker, as you will have gathered. And afterwards, about 50 of them put their stitches in. They were clamouring to do it. They thought it was absolutely fabulous and wanted to know all the details and all the history, and I'm no historian. And they were very, very happy to put their stitches in. And subsequently, various other ones came over, and we took them around the Preston House and Cold Harbour Mill and so on and so forth. So we had a fabulous time thanks to the tapestry. I did quite a lot of displays with Tom Maddock, and we did one in Kingsbridge, we did one in Dartington Hall, and there were others. And we were there for about a week at a time, over half term or Easter or something like that. And we manned this tapestry panel, whichever one it happened to be, all that time, just the two of us. And we coaxed a lot of money out of a lot of people. And
I
we
came
worked.
and put a stitch in at Dartington.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. We worked jolly hard and we raised a lot of money. And it was wonderful. Loved every minute of it. So thank you, Tom.